And there it is. All right, well, we're going to get started. I'm Sylvia Sherman. I'm Program Director at Community Music Center. We're just so thrilled you're with us tonight for CMC Sessions. This is our third year in this series that features CMC faculty teaching music at Community Music Center. And it's a series that was started by our Cultural Traditions Department with Traeger Otten, who's with us today. And this year's sessions is a collaboration between our Cultural Traditions Department and our Winds and Brass Department, who's headed up by Becca Burrington, who's also with us today. And the specific focus this year is on inspiration and influences, which is just a wonderful way to get kind of an inside picture of how our faculty have kind of what has been guiding them and inspiring them as professional musicians and as educators. And as we start our program, I want to take just a moment to acknowledge that Community Music Center is an organization that sits on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, and who are still living here today, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula, and still living here today. And we make this acknowledgement really to promote greater understanding of Native sovereignty, of cultural traditions and cultural rights, and to promote more equitable and positive relationships. And I am just so pleased that tonight's feature is Charlie Gurke as a faculty member at CMC. We're really fortunate to have Charlie teaching at CMC. Not only does he teach private lessons on saxophone, but he also coaches in our Saturday youth program, teaching Latin music, the Mission District Young Musicians program, and is probably most well known for his role in our growing jazz program. I think since Charlie has joined the CMC faculty, it's probably just about tripled in size with jazz ensemble offerings and different kinds of perspective, looking at different jazz through different lenses and entry points for people of, you know, various points on their journey studying different kinds of jazz. So I really want to acknowledge Charlie and thank him for that, and all of his roles at CMC. And now I'm going to turn it over to our faculty host, Traeger Otten, who's the brainchild of this series.
All right, how's it going? Great to see you. I had actually, my mom just sent me a message saying that she's having a hard time getting on. I don't know. I hope people aren't having a hard time getting on, but thank you all for coming so much. I'm really looking forward to Charlie, my friend and colleague, to hear about what Charlie has been doing. This series is about like what inspires us as musicians and teachers. So we're always trying to think, we're trying to highlight in this series like the great stories that all of our faculty have. And we've been doing this for like 3 years now. And I've just been kind of actually like kind of flabbergasted like at how great our faculty is and like the stories that they have and the musical experience they have, because as a fellow faculty member, we're always just seeing each other in the hall and it's another teacher and stuff. And we really don't know about what the real value and what the experiences of our faculty are. So I thought it was a good idea this year, me and Becca, to come up with the idea to like, what inspires us as musicians or as teachers. And so I'm going to try to be quick. Oh gosh, now my computer's messing with me. Oh gosh, sorry about that. It's not bringing it up. There it is. So I just want to tell you, I'm supposed to be doing a quick intro to Charlie's presentation. And I want to tell you a couple of things about Charlie. He's a Bay Area native. He got a bachelor's degree in music with an emphasis on composition from Cal State East Bay. Also got a master's degree in jazz studies from University of Oregon. He went to SOTA like I did. Actually, I'd like to hear what year you went to SOTA. I'm sure it was after me.
Class of 1998.
98. All right. I was 84.
Just missed you.
Yeah, exactly. But studied there with Wayne Wallace and Melesio Magdalullo. And Charlie plays with John Santos Sextet, very well known. I'm sure you guys all know who John is. Egaro Cambon with Candela Latido an electric squeeze box. He's played recently, which is kind of rare, post-COVID, at Monterey Jazz with electric squeeze box and Montreux Jazz Festivals. He was at Montreux with Pacific Mambo Orchestra, Grammy Award-winning orchestra. He's also composer and musical director of We Players Theater Company. And he's the musical director over there and also composer. He wrote scores, got some awards for writing for Macbeth and Caesar Maximus. Also faculty at Laney College, teaching music theory, and leads the jazz orchestra at Laney College. And like Sylvia was saying, he's been a very integral part of the jazz program at CMC. And he also teaches with me at MDYMP. We've been working there for, I don't know, a couple of years at least. Wonderful program, the Mission District's Young Musicians Program. We're there every Saturday. And please check out his website. It's Gurkestra. Just think Charlie Gurke, Gurke. So Gurkestra.com. You can see where he's playing and what he's done and listen to some of his music there. Also, I want to just say that we're going to be doing a question and answer session at the end. But I want you to please, everybody, if you could just put in the chat. I'll be checking, me and Sylvia and Becca will be checking the chat as we go along and writing down the different questions you have, because at the end of the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you want to ask Charlie some questions about what you hear, but please do it immediately, because, you know, if there's something that's like very apropos to ask even in the middle of the presentation, I don't want to interrupt Charlie, but we might do that. So Charlie, please take it away. Looking forward to your presentation, man.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see all of you here, students and fellow teachers, and some folks I don't know, which is exciting, or don't know yet. Yeah, I'll dive in pretty soon. I'm going to share some music and talk about some of the people that I've been playing with and working with and collaborating with recently, and also not so recently, as well as in the past 20 plus years. As Traeger mentioned, I am a Bay Area native, and I have moved away a couple times. I studied in New York City for a couple years, got my master's degree in Oregon at the University of Oregon, and had some really great teachers and mentors, and also fellow students and colleagues at those places. But this presentation, I'm going to focus on folks that I have worked with and learned from here in the Bay Area, and that just kind of came up naturally. But since I grew up here and I've been playing music here and studying music here for so long, I even had to kind of pare that down quite a bit. So I'll save some of the other, teachers and collaborators for more far-flung places for another time. But it's really a pleasure to be able to do that and to highlight, a lot of the great, just the great musicians and creative talent that are here in the Bay Area. All folks you can go check out and listen to. Some of them this weekend or next week. And I'm going to start with talking about my work with the John Santos Sextet. And if you don't know John, I'm assuming a lot of people know of John. He's been a pillar of the Latin music community and Latin jazz, especially here in the Bay Area, but also really worldwide for a long time, for decades, since he started performing, I think in the 70s and through the 80s and 90s. And I first encountered John when he was leading his group, the Machete Ensemble, which was a great band that he led for many years in the Bay Area. And so I used to go check him out at festivals and concerts and things like that. And as Traeger mentioned, I studied at the San Francisco School of the Arts, which at the time when I was there, Wayne Wallace, trombone player, composer, arranger, educator, and Malesio Magduluyo, a saxophonist, woodwind, multi-instrumentalist, as well as a composer and band leader. They were both teaching there at School of the Arts, so I got to learn from them directly, and also see them play out in the wild as well, which was great. And in addition, I would go to John Santos. Not only is he a musician and composer, but also very, very involved in the education around the music that and the traditions that he's involved in. So, the music of Latin America and the Caribbean and Latin jazz and all of that. So I'd go to lectures and demonstrations, but from John and also a lot of the folks in his band. And so when I was asked to join the sextet, which was, I think 2018, I think, time has, as we all know, is a little bit hard to to measure in these past few years, but I did about a year of gigs or so with them, and then we took a few years off, like most of us did. But I think it was around 2018. It was a great honor to be asked to join that sextet. But it wasn't too much of a surprise. I mean, I was a little bit surprised. The first call I got was, "Hey, do you want to come play the Monterey Jazz Festival with us in September of that year?" So it wasn't like, "Hey, do you want to come to a rehearsal and read some music or whatever?" But I've been playing with his rhythm section for a really long time. Marco Diaz on piano, Saul Sierra on bass, David Flores on drums have been three of my really frequent musical collaborators for over 10, 15, almost 20 years. I've known Marco in particular for a long time. So so it really felt like a great fit. I was really honored to that John asked me to join the group, and also really felt really comfortable joining the group with all these guys that I've been playing with for a long time there. And without too much further ado, I'm going to share a little bit of music. This is from a recent concert we did at Freight and Salvage. We're going to be back at the Freight the first weekend of April 1st and 2nd, Saturday and Sunday evenings, with some special guests. And this is just a little clip, that somebody took on their cell phone. It sounds pretty good, but it's just part of a tune that we were playing. And one of the things that is really, the title of this series, right, is inspiration and what's the other? It's inspiration and
Influences.
Influences and influences and inspiration. So what the thing I thought about immediately with kind of both of those, but especially inspiration, is that something that really inspires me are my fellow musicians. I mean, I love to play and really and to especially to improvise, to create in the moment. And that's something about playing with John's group that is really inspiring, is that he creates space for everybody on the bandstand to contribute, to really do what they do best, but also not to micromanage, and to, or in other words, really what makes it, especially the sort of jazz part of what we do is really a lot of freedom. And so what we're going to listen to is just a little bit of a piece that started. We won't hear the beginning. It started with a traditional Yoruban chant, just voices, and then moves into just a minor blues. So the whole setup is very wide open. It opens with a chant, and then it's just, now we're going to play. There's no melody. There's just a form, one of the kind of oldest forms in jazz, the 12-bar blues form. And it's pretty wide open for improvisation. And so in this brief clip that I grabbed, what struck me and what I remembered from being in it is there are parts of it that sound like we rehearsed, but we didn't rehearse any of these moments. But like I said, it's a very broad thing. We don't, I don't think we even rehearsed it at all, because there's really nothing to rehearse. And it's those kind of moments that really inspire me about being on stage with musicians of this caliber, is like the ability for them to really like be in the moment and create these things that have never happened before, that that are unplanned, unrehearsed, and really beautiful. So here's just a little bit of that. This is well, it doesn't even really have a title. It's just a little bit of this minor blues that we played. All right. So I wanted to share a link with everybody. I played with John's band. If you're interested in hearing more, well, first of all, we released an album earlier this year, just in January, called, I believe if the full title is Filosofía Caribeña Volume 3, I think. It's A Puerto Rico del Alma, which is dedicated to Puerto Rico, the music and the culture and the community of Puerto Rico. So that's out. You can check that out. But I was going to share a link. We played at the Bach Dancing and Dynamite Society this past Sunday, and they did a great job of recording video and audio of the concert, and it's up on their site for streaming. So I'm going to put that in the chat if you want to, hear more of what we've been doing recently. It's there. It was a really fun concert. Destiny Wolf was a special guest on vocals. So you can bookmark that and, scroll through it at your leisure. So I'm going to switch gears quite a bit here and talk about another group that I was lucky to collaborate with recently. Another local group, the Rova Saxophone Quartet. And the Rova Saxophone Quartet's another group that I became aware of when I was in high school here in the Bay Area, and they have an incredible history. They're this year celebrating 45 years together as a group, with one personnel change, I believe, in the 80s at some point. So really, the same four people making music together for, all 45 years more, with one slight change. And it's really incredible what they do. I'll kind of save their whole, biography. You can read all about them on their website and whatnot. But they play what might be called avant-garde jazz or new music, or it's very much on the sort of exploratory end of the spectrum of music. And there's all kinds of different sounds and textures that they make. When I first heard them, I wasn't really sure entirely what to think. But as I was kind of getting my ears opened up to a lot of different sounds in the world of music, and was able to check them out again and go to like a lecture demonstration that they gave and kind of understand what they were doing, I got more and more into it, along with some friends of mine who were kind of getting into that aspect of music making, less notated and notes, rhythms, and chords and things, but exploring kind of like the full range of what music and improvisation has to offer. So I had the opportunity to collaborate with them through this theater company that I've been working with since 2010, which is called We Players. That's just WE Players. And they do site-specific theater. So we've been doing theater in public and sort of semi-public spaces all around the Bay Area. And I've been composing music for those shows. And we collaborated with Rova and the dance company called Inkboat, who used to be based in the Bay Area. They're now based in Europe, but they were in the Bay Area for a long time. On a production of Beowulf, which, if anybody, I don't know, might remember from high school or college English or something like that. But Beowulf is this epic Old English poem, very long. It's been made into, it's been, well, translated out of Old English, but made into films and comic books and all kinds of things. And there's a monster, Grendel, in it. And but we did this very kind of deconstructed, non-narrative adaptation of Beowulf. There were 2 dancers from Inkboat, 2 actors from We Players, and 5 saxophones, me plus Rova, which is about the right ratio, I think, for most things. I think you want your ratio of saxophones to kind of outnumber your actors, your dancers, your this, that, whatever. But it was really fun, the process to kind of work with them and work with Rova and really kind of get into their process of how they go about music making. I mean, some of it is notated and it's kind of more traditional, music, but most of the stuff we did and the clips I'm going to share were very much improvisatory in how we came up with them and then also how we performed them. Very little in the show, the sort of maybe 2 to 2.5 hour production, was written down, and we worked things out, but it was kind of like creating a structure for the improvisation. And in fact, that's a term that a lot of people use in that world, is structured improvisation. So, the structure can be lots of different things, so you're kind of creating a structure within which to play around in. It was, I think it was a really fun process. Really interesting production, and again, back to this kind of inspiration theme. It was really inspiring to work with and see how these musicians work together and had developed this way of working together and really their own kind of language over these, at that time was 40 years of working together. And now they're going to be celebrating 45 years of working together and really creating this kind of their own kind of improvisational language that I got to be a part of a little bit. So I'm going to share, I kind of grabbed a few clips. The live theater, especially of this kind that moves around and isn't just like on a stage, is really hard to capture on camera. So the visuals won't give you much. They'll give you a little bit. There's some kind of cool stuff, but the sounds and the textures, will hopefully give you an idea of what was going on, how we were trying to sort of like create this atmosphere of monsters and heroes and these sorts of things. So here's just a little bit of Beowulf with the Rova Saxophone Quartet. I'm going to warn folks, the first clip, there are 3 clips edited together. The first one is kind of quiet, but then the second 2 clips are kind of loud and cacophonous. So if you're using headphones or earbuds, don't crank the volume up too loud or you might get a little shock. So here we go. right. So just a little bit of those, yeah. Like I said, was saying that the sort of textures and atmospheres that we were, creating there. Yeah, again, if you're not familiar with Roba, this music scene in general kind of flies under the radar to some degree. Although, they've been all over the world. They were one of the first kind of avant-garde jazz or even jazz groups possibly to visit the Soviet Union in the 80s. And so there's a really long and interesting history that they've got. And I'll be at their 45th anniversary concert, I think in September, I believe it is. But they'll be playing around the Bay Area. You can check it out and kind of have your ears opened if they're not already. Let's see, what was next? Oh yeah, so now I'm gonna kind of turn back in another musical direction, and share a little bit of some of the work that I do with Edgardo Cambon, who's a percussionist and vocalist, songwriter, who's originally from Uruguay, from Montevideo, Uruguay, but has been in the Bay Area for over 30 years. And I've been playing with his groups, Candela and Latido. They're kind of two sizes of the same project. And Candela's a salsa group, and then Latido's a kind of a smaller, usually quintet, playing salsa and Latin music, and a lot of original music of Edgardo's. And I do I've had the pleasure to collaborate on arranging and working with some of his compositions. In fact, his most recent recording, which came out several years ago, I don't know, I think 2016 or 17, something like that, features a number of my arrangements, about half the album, which is a lot of fun. I'm really happy with how that came out. And it's really fun for me to collaborate with somebody like Edgardo, who is, some people might use the term untrained musician, although he's certainly studied a great deal, made multiple trips to Cuba to study percussion and singing. And he's really knowledgeable about not only Cuban music or not only Uruguayan music, but a lot of music from Latin America, lots of different styles. And he's very versatile and very musical, but he doesn't read or write music, but he comes up with great melodic ideas, rhythmic ideas. And it's a really fun kind of collaboration for me. I love working that way personally because, for one reason, I do write music. I'm a composer and improviser and arranger, but I don't write words. So collaborating with vocalists is always really fun for me because it's like something very familiar to me. I obviously listen to music with lyrics and love lyrics, but it's not something that comes naturally to me. And so to collaborate with people that it does come naturally to, or that have developed that part of their musicality is really fun. So that I'm able to kind of bring what I do, the harmonies and orchestrations and arrangements and stuff to what they have. As well as, Edgardo and I think share to a certain degree a lot of the same interests, a lot of the same kind of affinity for the more, some of the more, the kind of salsa and Latin music that with social commentary and sort of political themes and things like that. And I've been playing and working with Edgardo on a regular basis for maybe 10 years or so, usually with the same rhythm section that I play with in John Santos' band. Marco Diaz and Saul Sierra are usually along with us, along with Omar Ledesma, who's another colleague of ours here at CMC on percussion, or Julio Areas, along with some other really great musicians. And just as, I was talking about with John's band, with John Santos' group, and John's sort of ability to allow a lot of freedom on the bandstand for people to create, and to bring themselves to the bandstand. in a dance music situation, like in Edgardo's band, it's a little bit different. In some ways, there's a little less freedom. However, with with Edgardo and the musicians that we play with in his group, there's a similar kind of freedom within the language that we all share, you know. And so with these musicians, and in this situation, there is a lot of freedom, and that's another thing that really, you know, kind of, as I mentioned, like inspires about my fellow musicians, that inspires me, is this kind of ability to be spontaneous and to kind of have a dialogue through the music, you know, through the shared language we have. And I'm going to share a little bit of a piece that we collaborated on a couple years ago during the pandemic. There's a great organization called Music in Place that was organized by, amongst other people, Aaron Linkton, who's a fellow saxophonist of mine, but an organization that kind of sprung up during the pandemic to really help musicians create music during those challenging times. And so they were giving out grants and kind of fostering some creative projects. And Edgardo was awarded a grant to create a piece of music and to record it and record the video. And this piece is called Rey sin Corona, so a king without a crown. And there's a lot of great double entendre with the, you know, corona being obviously the coronavirus, but also this idea of it, the corona being a crown, you know, and so he's kind of talking about two things at once, both the pandemic and the virus, but then there's also a lot of political commentary about a king without a crown, and you know, who was in the White House at that time and during that time, and these kinds of things. So we'll hear a little bit of see a little bit of the beginning of this tune. So this is Edgardo's tune and my arrangement and sax playing, and then we'll also see some of those musicians I mentioned: Marco Diaz on piano, Saul Sierra on bass, Omar Ledesma on percussion.
Hay que quitarle la corona al virus,
pa' que se quede tranquilo.
hay que quitarle la corona al virus,
Pongámoslo ya en el olvido.
hay que quitarle la corona al virus,
Se cree el rey atrevido.
hay que quitarle la corona al virus.
¡Opa! Llegó la salsa. Latido de mi corazón. Seguimos hoy creativos, respetando la distancia, a combatir la ignorancia con máscara y desde lejos. Escuchen bien los consejos en esta simple canción. Quédense adentro de la casa, que es la única solución.
Hay que quitarle la corona al virus,
Es invisible el enemigo.
hay que quitarle la corona al virus.
Resulta que un colorado allá por la Casa Blanca se lo ve muy preocupado, pues su campaña no avanza. Pero hay que tener cuidado, que el perro muerde callao, que no te engañe ese cheque de impuestos que tú has pagado. Despierta, chach. Y esto es lo que hay, morena.
So yeah, we can. I'll put a link to that full video. It's up on YouTube. You can search for it, but I'll put a link to it if you want to hear the rest of it. There's some percussion solos, short sax solo. There's some pregones. You can hear Edgardo sing a little bit more about the situation. But that was a lot of fun to do. I should also mention the video was recorded, and the audio and video recorded and produced by Javier Cabanillas, another local percussionist who used to teach at CMC, I believe, right? Was Javier yeah, former faculty member at CMC. Nice.
Hey, Charlie, you actually just got a question. You ready for
Oh,
a question?
sure, yeah, of course.
Um,
Yeah,
this is
I
from
see.
Anton. It's great to hear about Charlie's professional collaborations, but can he also say anything about what inspired him when he was a student learning his instrument and discovering his directions? How did he get into jazz?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, getting into jazz initially really was part of that was just being a saxophonist in some ways. You know, the certain instruments. I mean, what's one of the really nice things about jazz and, you know, sort of, for lack of a better word, you know, creative music, improvised music, is that really any instrument fits in. But as you know, you all might recognize, like in historically anyway, and just kind of generally speaking, certain instruments tend to kind of get put in different categories, right? People think of, an electric guitar, for instance, as you know, rock and roll maybe, or whatever, and maybe a violin is classical music, and a saxophone definitely, I think, it's kind of a jazz instrument, and of course you hear it in different kinds of music, but so just being a kid playing saxophone, jazz band was sort of a natural place to wind up in school, but what really got me really excited about it was learning about improvisation. Really, I mean, I learned how to, for the first few years of playing the instrument, I was just learning how to read music and learning how to play the instrument. And then when I started to get into jazz and introduce this concept of improvisation, it really kind of sparked my interest of like, oh, this is something totally different, because it's new every time. It's a challenge, and it was kind of, it was fun to learn about, but also really fun to do. And so jazz just sort of, that kind of, it came up at a time, that sort of like right when I was getting into high school sort of time, and it was just a good time for me to kind of go deep into it. In terms of these more like specific directions I've gone, a big part of that is really, I think, being here in the Bay Area and also studying with the people that I studied with. So a lot of the musicians, I mean, I mentioned, two of the people who taught at my high school, Wayne Wallace and Melesio Magdalullo, they both played in John Santos' band, but they also, did a lot of other stuff as well. And it seemed to me, at least, that most of my teachers and mentors kind of were kind of move fluidly between these different related genres, and in the Bay Area, especially, a lot of jazz, a lot of Latin music, but also other genres as well, blues and R&B. And I would see my teachers play in these different contexts, and it sort of felt kind of natural to just kind of go wherever I was inspired to go, and that happened to be at least as a performer into like the jazz world, and also into the Latin world. And there's such a strong scene for Latin music here in the Bay Area that it was really easy to kind of tap into it, and the musicians, not just in that scene, but I think in general in the Bay Area, for the most part, are very welcoming. If you show an interest in whatever they're doing, they're happy to kind of share with you. And from there, it just kind of took off. I mean, I just sort of tried to check out as much stuff as I could and play as much as I could, and that was, yeah. But it kind of gets back to, just really being inspired by playing with other people, going out and hearing them play, and also like playing with them, being on the bandstand or in the, rehearsal studio with them. And I think I've got a couple more things to share. So before we run out of time, I'll share a quick version, or a quick snippet of a little bit of my music. Now I released an album a little over a year ago with one of my projects, and I just use Gurke as sort of a catch-all for whatever I'm working on. But this was a band that with these musicians that I had been working with. We had a regular gig one Sunday a month for about 2 years, which gave us a lot of time to develop a lot of materials for me to, bring in these tunes. Some of these tunes I'd had sitting around for a long time. Some of them were brand new, but we, through kind of playing them together once a month, we got a chance to kind of develop the concept as a group. And this group I put together, I really had these specific musicians in mind, and you'll see the clip. I'm going to share it. Scott, again, David Flores on drums, who I've played with in many different projects, including John's sextet, but also a band called Carne Cruda that was together. We did a bunch of touring, playing original music, as well as we've got Luke Curley, who in this clip is playing tuba. He also plays trombone, who was also in this band Carne Cruda with Dave and I. Camilo Landau, also a member of Carne Cruda and a collaborator of mine since high school, since we went to the School of the Arts together. And we've been collaborating since then on a lot of different projects. Marlon Aldana, a new collaborator, percussionist Marlon Aldana, a new collaborator, or relatively new, I should say. And then Isaac Norell, playing saxophone, tenor saxophone in this clip, who also plays keyboards and flute. One thing that was kind of the reason I chose these particular musicians, I mean, some of them I've been working with for a long time. I know them very well, but also there was this kind of sound I was looking for that was a little less standard. So we've got a tuba player, which there's a lot of tuba in certain Latin music, certainly like banda and some Mexican styles of music and other kinds of scenes, but to find a tuba player or just any of these musicians that kind of understand Latin music, but also jazz, but also some different, have these different influences. And for me, that's a very it's a very Bay Area kind of thing. Like to, again, with talking about the teachers I had growing up, would be able to move between these different traditions, and also combine them, and I think that's a lot of what is kind of attractive about a lot of the scenes here in the Bay Area. People are putting different things together, and like experimenting with different things. And that's kind of what this band, I had in mind with this band, is to have some people that could do some different things, so Luke plays tuba, but he also plays trombone sometimes. Isaac plays saxophone. He also plays keyboard sometimes. And we have people like moving around a little bit, playing different instruments, getting some different textures. I'm going to share, this is a clip of a recording that it's out in the world. It's on this clip's on YouTube, but it hasn't been released yet. But it's part of a series of compositions that started with this last album that we released, that are named after and inspired by the Loteria deck, the Mexican Loteria game. And so this is the La Araña, the spider. And take a listen here. So I'll share the link to maybe that and Edgardo's video if I can grab them. But you can also look those up they're on YouTube. And looks like we are getting close to time, huh? Or so maybe let's open it up for questions. I do have one more clip that I could share, but I think if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to talk, or we can listen to more music. What?
Well, does anybody have a question in particular? I mean, I have a general question, but which is just like, what has been the most inspiring thing that ever happened to you? Was there ever like one like moment or a musical moment on stage that you had which like changed your life? Because I can kind of say that, you know, as a musician too. And so that's mine, but does anybody have any other questions?
About
Or-
anything.
Yeah. But if no one else asked, then go for that one. Because I'm always curious about that.
Oh yeah, it looks like in the chat, Anton has a question about role models, particular musicians or groups. And yeah, I mean, I think there are some specific ones, you know, but it does get to be a little bit of a long list in some ways. I mean, certainly I wanted to highlight some of the musicians that I learned from and was inspired by here, you know, as I mentioned, in the Bay Area and growing up. And I mean, even that list could be much, much longer than than just the few folks and groups I mentioned today. But I think like any musician, you know, it's like our list of inspirations grows over time. And, you know, because there's certainly like, you know, I have my saxophone inspirations, my composer inspirations, you know, there's all, it gets to be a pretty broad list, although, you know, within each one you can kind of narrow things down, but it's really hard. I mean, one question that I'm sure a lot of people get when somebody learns that you play an instrument, they say, oh, who's your favorite sax player, or who's your favorite, you know, violinist, or who's your favorite whatever, right? But that's, if anybody who's been asked that question, any of you musicians have been asked that question, know that that's actually kind of a hard question to answer, right? You know, so in terms of like particular musicians or groups or role models, it's that's a long list. But I would encourage folks to go check out some of these local groups, like John's group. You know, come see us play. Come and check out his historic output as well. He's put out so much amazing stuff. As well as, like I was saying, the Rova Saxophone Quartet, and, you know, start there. You know, let those lead you down some rabbit holes.
So that was a good question by Danielle. Anton. We also got one from Danielle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking back at your early influences.
Yeah, that's actually, I like that question. That's a good one.
Yeah, I paid attention to this experience or what this person said. You know what? What comes to mind is there were some people who brought up sort of technical things that maybe I wasn't ready to hear, you know? And so, you know, I kind of maybe brushed off like, oh, maybe I don't need to work on this or work on that. Or if I didn't understand something. I mean, sometimes it's how it's presented, you know? So I remember, you know, later in my development, coming across things and going, oh, is that what that guy meant when he said like, hey man, you need to work on this, you know? But if a teacher or a fellow musician kind of presents it that way, like, hey kid, you need to, you know, work on whatever, your long tones or something like, I mean, I worked on my long tones, but you know, for instance, it's harder to hear than if somebody says, hey man, you sound really good, but you know what would be great to do, you know, to present it in a positive way. So I remember some things like that, you know, that were like kind of presented in kind of off the cuff, you know, underhanded kind of ways. But you know, what's funny is something that, well, it's adjacent, but it's very pertinent to what we all do, was when I was first in college, so, you know, 18, 19, somebody said, oh man, I'm taking this Alexander technique class. You should check it out. And I was like, I feel fine. I don't need to take the Alexander technique, but I kind of wish I did. My chiropractor bills and my massage therapy bills would probably be lower if I had like started paying attention, because I developed some pretty bad physical habits that I'm like still working to, to overcome. And so that's something that I really wish I had maybe checked out when I was young and dumb.
Someone also asked about in your composing, what about process?
Yeah.
And if you have discipline practice, or is it more spontaneous? I would think that would go to like just musicianship in general, but
yeah, that's a great question. And the part of the answer is I unfortunately don't have a super disciplined composition practice. Or I say unfortunate, I mean, I write a lot of music, but I don't, I've never really had that kind of compositional practice that I think a lot of like people who are, sort of composers, and maybe that's all they do, or that's their, kind of main thing, where they, just like anybody with a job they wake up, or when they get home from their day job or whatever, they sit down and they write music, and it's a very kind of like thing that they do every day or what, or on a kind of regular schedule. But with me, it is kind of when inspiration hits, or when there's a deadline. Deadlines are great for for that. But in terms of the process, actual like musical process, that is incredibly varied for me. And when I teach composition, which I don't get to do too often, but is always really fun, it's I kind of present it as such of that, like, you can start anywhere, and I do that too. Like sometimes it'll be with a specific harmonic progression, specific, start with a specific chord progression, and kind of work out a melody and a groove or whatever. They put things around that. Start with a groove, and have an idea like, this tune really feels like it, or what, I want to work on something now that, like the one we listened to, it was a cumbia, and that, like that, kind of hearing that vibe, or start with a melody, and that can mean a melody with or without rhythm. So there's all kinds of places to start. I do like to start from different places, because it can be, it's a good way to get out of habits, of like always starting with a set chord progression, for instance, or something like that, or even a set time signature, so sometimes challenge yourself to say, I'm going to start without those things. What do I come up with? And a lot of times it's just kind of having an idea in your head or on your instrument. Sometimes, I'll compose on my instrument or on other instruments, on the piano or even the bass, sometimes, things like that.
Yeah, that was a great question. Just like, what is the impetus for your creative process?
Yeah.
I'm sure we could do a whole session just on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We also had another couple questions, unless you got something just more to say about that.
No, not right now. Yeah, I'm happy.
Miguel was asking, and I wonder what was your first paid gig? And that's a great question.
That is a good question. And I think my first real like professional gig, like I think that sort of a friend of the family's maybe paid me to play at a birthday party or something, but I don't really count that as, but my first like gig kind of out in the world. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but my first gig out in the world, I think was, I might be wrong about this, but what I kind of remember is like the start from my gigging career. I started playing when I was in high school, and some other people might have this experience too. I'm trying to kind of rack my brain, because sometimes, not just in high school, but kind of at any point in time, but when you're in a band with friends and maybe you play some shows, but nobody really makes any money because it's a door deal and you have to split the door between like 5 different bands, and so each band walks home with like a few bucks or whatever, you know. And in those kind of bands, you know, and I was in a couple of those bands in high school where that money doesn't go to the musicians. You put that like in a band fund so you can like make stickers or put it towards a recording or something like that, you know. Like those felt a little different. Like when I started sort of like working as a freelancer was really in the salsa scene in the Bay Area. Like I studied with a local sax player named Pete Cornell for a year or two, and some of you might know Pete. Pete's great; he's a character, and he has played, you know, among other things, played with Louis Romero in his band Mazacote for many years. Louis is a legend in the salsa world, and Pete kind of got me into that scene and kind of started recommending me for gigs, and so I played with some salsa gigs when I was in, or started playing with a salsa band when I was in high school. A band that's not around anymore, but was around for a while, playing at places like Jellies and Club Bahia, which was on Market Street, burned down. But yeah, it's a good question.
Great. Well, I think that we're kind of at the end of our time, although the last question is a perfect segue into just a few announcements, which is, do you teach beginner students? And I think that you do, Charlie. Is that correct?
I do. Yep.
You can sign up to study with Charlie, either as a saxophone teacher or as in one of his jazz ensembles, or any of the other jazz ensembles or Latin jazz ensembles, or other kinds of stuff at CMC. So there's some information in the chat about that. Charlie, thank you for sharing your
So
inspiration
much, Charlie.
and your influences. It's just, you know, what you talked about in terms of having a space where you come together with other talented musicians and that freedom to just create something new. I mean, that's really what all the study and the practice is for, is to be able to create in those moments. So that's very inspiring to me. Want to let people know that in a couple of weeks, we're going to have another inspiring session with a beloved teacher at CMC, Irene Chagall, who has literally just grown musicians, young musicians from the weest of ages. She teaches our Music for Children program. She has just graduated students into private lessons on different instruments in our children's chorus, and then they go on. And now we're working with those same children as partners in our community. But she will be on March 30th talking about the melodic line of my life, and talking about the impact of folktales, storytelling, and musical play, and how it's inspired her work. So once again, Charlie, thank you for sharing your
Thanks
inspiration.
so much, Charlie.
And we'll look forward to seeing some of you around CMC or on the next CMC sessions on March 30th.
So they're every 2 weeks. This year, they're every 2 weeks. It's not the second and fourth or the first and third. It's every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we got Irene, and then 2 weeks after that, we have, I think it's John Jang, or I don't have it in front of me, but we're every 2 weeks we got it. So keep checking the email to know who's coming up.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sylvia, Charlie. Take care.
See y'all soon.
Everyone, bye.